Hey, welcome to the Irreverent Reader. The book we're going to talk about tonight is Ozark, Magic and Folklore by Vance Randolph. It is, first since we're doing a book on magic, I thought we'd keep the video a little chill and magic-y, and we're gonna light a candle and some incense while we talk about the subject matter. I'll let you know why I chose this book, why I wanted to read it in the first place, because it is an unusual book. I've always loved folklore. I love mythology. I love understanding why people believe what they do. So it fits pretty well within my interests. But then reading it was funny. It was enjoyable and funny. And I was very surprised by some of the contents. And tickled by many of them as well. So let's start first with lighting a candle. I'm even going to use matches instead of a lighter. I hope this isn't too loud. I love that sulfury smell from a match. So the reason I chose this book, I'm actually from the Ozarks. The Ozarks, if you don't know, are a very old mountain range. They're not technically mountains anymore. They're very large hills, and they are in southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, and bleed a little bit into Oklahoma, but not really. All four of my grandparents were born in Arkansas, and I grew up on just the very edge of the Ozarks. But there is a lot that I was surprised to find that there is a fair amount of Ozarker in me, because I was very familiar with certain ideas in this book. So that's one of the reasons why I picked it up. I enjoy family history and genealogy and learning about my background. And so picking up a book on the folklore of the region I found very interesting. Vance Randolph was actually referenced in a university course that I watched on YouTube, because I do things like watch university courses on YouTube, and it was a course on the Ozarks, just the Ozark culture, the Ozark people, the Ozark, even the general landscape of the Ozark region. And they talked about Vance Randolph and how he really made a sociological study of the people. He spent decades living amongst the Ozark people and really earning their trust. And at one point, I think he was even a sheriff of one of the towns for a while. So he really was an Ozarker. But from reading just this one book, he has, I think, a total of three books like this. But just from reading this one book, you can tell that his entire time that he spent in the Ozarks was really about watching the people and finding out about them and listening to them and talking to them, not just living day to day as an Ozarker. Okay, so anyway, that's why I picked up the book. It's a really dry read. I don't necessarily recommend this for somebody who's just looking for a fun folk story. There are other books out there about American folklore if you want something that's entertaining. There are very few books that when I read them do I fall asleep just from the monotony of it. I can read some pretty dry books. This one I fell asleep reading several times. It was difficult to make it through this book, but I really wanted to. And I think that anyone who is interested in the more useful aspects of folklore, shall we say, anyone who's interested in that would really, I think, benefit from reading at least certain chapters of this book. Maybe not the courtship and marriage chapter, though we are going to read a snippet from that. So let's get to it. The first thing that I wanted to read to you was something that I grew up with, just a normal activity. It was just something that we did. It was as natural to me as when somebody sneezes, you say bless you, or you say gesundheit, or if somebody says excuse me, you say, oh, you're excused, or somebody says sorry, you say that's okay. It was just a normal reaction to something for me. And so I'm going to start on page 57. Here we go. Okay. If two friends are walking side by side and unthoughtedly allow a tree to come between them, it means that they will have a serious quarrel soon. One way to break this spell is for both parties to cry instantly and in concert, "Bread and butter!" Now, I know that sounds weird. Bread and butter. What? So, if two of you are walking along, if you're walking side by side, and you walk and a tree or a post or anything like that goes between you, and you have to separate from that person in order for the post to go between you, when you join back up on the other side, you say bread and butter, and that wards off the chance of a quarrel. Now, I didn't know in my childhood where that saying came from or what it was about or anything like that. My father taught us to do it, and his mother and grandmother taught him to do it. It might have been his father's mother that taught him to do it. It was just something that we said, you walk, you say bread and butter, and make sure, preserve your friendship luck. So yeah, bread and butter. Another one that I was surprised to learn is an Ozark tradition, is something that my parents still do to this day. This is still a thing for them. I'm sure it's probably still a thing for other people too. So now these are New Year's Eve traditions. New Year's Eve, it's considered essential. You absolutely must. If you are going to have a good new year, or if you're going to have a good year overall, if your year is going to go well, you absolutely have to eat black-eyed peas and pork on New Year's Day. I believe my mother also says cabbage in there. You have to eat black-eyed peas, cabbage, and pork on New Year's Day. And so when I was reading through here, I thought, oh, she didn't make that up. That's a thing, according to the Ozark lore. But this is the one that really got me. The one that made me giddy. And I think I even made a post about this on either Instagram or on my Facebook account. Because I was taught this by my grandmother. Let's see here. What page is that on? Page 16. Here we go. Now, the version that I learned of this was slightly different. But a child who sings in bed or at the table is likely to bring misfortune upon the whole family and come to a bad end, as indicated in the old rhyme, "Sing at the table, sing in bed, bugger man will get you when you are dead." Now, the version that I learned of this is slightly different. It's "Sing in the table, whistle in bed, the devil will come and grab you by the hair of the head." But nonetheless, it's a rhyme to get children to behave, sit at the table like a nice person. You don't have to whistle or sing at the table. Just sit and eat and have conversation like a nice person. Or go to bed, stop singing in bed. You need to close your eyes and go to sleep. So let's see, what's the next item? So those were the things that made me really get into this book. I think that if there hadn't been certain things that were so present in my childhood, in my youth, that I didn't immediately recognize, that I probably would have put this book down much earlier. And I'm really glad that I didn't put this book down, because there are some whoppers in here. There are some doozies. And that's what we are going to look at next. The next one is the first one that popped my eyes out of my head. There is a widespread belief that warts can be charmed off by touching them with the hand of a corpse. I have seen this tried several times. The warts disappeared after a while, just as they generally do under any other treatment, or with no treatment at all. On the other side of the balance, I have met an undertaker who handles many bodies every year, and both his hands are covered in warts. This was my first introduction in this book to the idea that dead bodies hold some magic in them, hold some sort of charm, that you can use the dead body to do things like take off warts. Oops, sorry, I hit the microphone. So, ew, gross. Where'd it go? Here it is. This one's kind of gross. Okay. Otto Ernest Rayburn reports a case in which asthma was cured by tying a large frog. Let me start that one over again. Oh no, here we go. Otto Ernest Rayburn reports a case in which asthma was cured by tying a live frog on the patient's throat. The frog completely absorbed the disease and was left in position until it died. Ew. It gets worse. Rayburn says also that some hill folk treat asthma by killing a steer, cutting it open, and thrusting the patient's bare feet into the warm body cavity and keeping them there until the entrails cool. So, a warm foot bath of cow guts to cure your asthma. Sorry. I keep looking down at my notes. I've written down which stories are on which page, so that's why I keep looking over there. Okay, so this one is about a sty. You know, I think they're clogged tear ducts or whatever they are. When you get a sty, I've had one before. I did not get rid of it the way that this book recommends. So, the tail of a black cat drawn across the eye every day is the prime remedy for granulated eyelids. Some healers even claim to have cured cataracts with this simple remedy, reinforced by a few old sayings. In treating what is known as a sty, it is necessary to cut the end of the cat's tail. And then apply a few drops of the blood to the sty itself. So you cut the end of a cat's tail. I don't know how you're getting a cat to sit still for this, but you cut the end of the tail and then wipe the blood across where the sty is in order to cure it. Oh, okay. This one, I have a few friends who might find this one interesting. I know a few people who actually do practice something similar to this. Ooh, keep hitting the microphone, sorry. I know some people who so the hair that comes out of your brush, so like when you clean your comb or your brush, or you know, whenever you combed your hair and you have that extra hair that needs to be done away with, I know people who believe that it is not a good idea to just throw the hair in the trash or to throw it out, because there are people in the world who have or would use your hair or your fingernail clippings or anything like that to cast a hex or a spell or a charm on you, and you don't want that to happen. So instead of just throwing away your hair and your fingernail clippings, I know several people who actually just burn them. They burn them. According to Ozark magic and folklore, that is not permissible. So, to burn combings or hair which has been cut off is forbidden to Ozark girls, as it would make their hair brittle. Combings should be buried in the ground. Mrs. Mary Elizabeth Mahunke of Miney, Missouri, tells me that one must never throw combings out of the door. If a bird should use even one hair in building a nest, the original owner of the hair is likely to go insane. Others say that to have your hair in a bird's nest won't necessarily drive you crazy, but it will cause a series of terrible headaches. Okay, so this next one I was a little bit surprised by. Most of the things in this book are very material superstitions. There's a lot about horseshoes and pennies and buttons and lucky objects. There is a lot about food and when you eat it, when you don't eat it. There are several items about what you're allowed to tell other people, how you're allowed to conduct yourself in front of other people, how story is passed, or how these traditions are passed from individual to individual. There are several that say that you can't learn certain traditions, like a yarb doctor, somebody who is not actually a doctor, but more like a medicine man or medicine woman, a wise man or woman who just happens to know about herbs. You're not allowed to learn those. A woman can't learn from a woman, and a man can't learn from a man. It has to be a man who teaches a woman, or the other way around. You have to learn from the opposite sex for some reason. And I don't get a clear picture as to why that is in this book. There might be other traditions that I don't know about that do explain why that is the belief. There is also a common aspect to a lot of this, is that these all have to be passed down within the family. I feel like that's pretty common in folklore. That has to do with the tribal nature of small communities, I think. Okay, this one was a little different. This one actually kind of surprised me. Let's see here. If a girl has a quarrel with her lover, she may get him back by tying a needle and drawing a little blood from the third finger of her left hand. Using the needle as a pen, she writes her initials and his in blood on an iron wood chip, draws 3 circles around the letters, and buries the chip in the ground. The boyfriend will be hanging around again in 3 days or less. So I was surprised by this because it's straight up blood magic. Like, that's using your own blood to cast a spell. I was very surprised by that particular level of witchcraft in this. I'm going to talk more about witchcraft here in a minute and how this book views witchcraft, and that might give you a little bit more understanding of why the way this book just threw in the blood magic surprised me. Okay, but we're going to keep going. Oh, here's another one. Yeah. A girl can take a needle. This goes back to just listen. A girl can take a needle which has been stuck into a dead body. There we are with dead bodies again. This book, these people are obsessed with dead bodies. I have a theory as to why that might be. A girl can take a needle which has been stuck into a dead body, cover it with dirt in which a corpse has been laid, and wrap the whole thing in a cloth cut from a winding sheet. This is supposed to be a very powerful love charm, and a woman who owns such a thing can make any man fall in love with her. The love is not what I expected from that when I started reading it. This is in the courtship and marriage chapter. I don't know what power dead bodies contained that they could influence the world as love charms. Dead bodies appear actually pretty frequently in this book, and I think my hypothesis is that, death was such a constant in their world. If you've ever done any genealogy whatsoever, you've seen the scrolls and scrolls and scrolls of family names in the census. And those families are filled with children one year, and then another year, clearly half the children have been wiped out by disease. There's constant death in this world, and I think that the prevalence of death gave it a very mystical feeling or power in that world, in this time. The book, I didn't mention this, the time period of this book, he moved to the Ozarks, I believe in the 1880s or the 1890s, and he lived there until the 1940s. So this does span quite a bit of time. I could have those time periods completely wrong. No, I do. I have those time periods completely wrong. He lived there since the 20s, the 1920s, through the 19... Okay, so this book was published in 1947 in its original edition. So 20 years or so. But he's talking to people who have lived there during this time period. So all the people who he's speaking to are, local people who've grown up there. So some of the stories he mentions are from the 1800s and the 1880s and the 1890s. That's, I think, where my confusion came in. But anyhow, nonetheless, even up to 1947, death was very prevalent, especially in these areas that they don't have doctors. They have herbalists. They didn't have vaccines. They had yarrow root is what they had. And while I'm sure they had some effective herbs and some effective treatments for things, the flu could kill you much easier then than it can now. Okay, so my next item. In some localities, it is said that a man hides the dried tongue of a turtle dove in a girl's cabin. Gross. This makes her fall madly in love with him, and she can't deny him anything. I was told of a case in which a girl's superstitious parents searched the cabin for days, trying to find the tongue, which they believed must be hidden there. The neighbors laughed about this, and the girl herself said that turtle doves' tongues had nothing to do with the case. But the parents still believed the old story. They never did find the dove's tongue. Gross. No. Can you imagine? This means that they had to catch a turtle dove, pry open its little... Well, I'm sure they killed it. And pry open its little beak and cut out its tongue, and then dry it, just so they could put it in the cabin, hide it in the cabin to make a girl fall in love with them. I feel like there are easier means to get girls to fall in love with you. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, this book does have an awful lot of love spells in it. Okay, page 170. Okay, on the next page. So this is one that not only will I be familiar with, but you will all be familiar with, I think. I think that most people know this, at least a version of this rhyme that I'm getting ready to tell you about. But I had never heard it applied in this manner. Okay, so I'm going to read. Marriage is still regarded as a serious matter in the Ozarks, and there are many singular superstitions connected with the choice of a mate. The typical hillman is determined to marry a virgin at any cost, and is firmly convinced that he can detect virginity at a glance. The theory is that every female child has a tiny cleft or depression in the end of her nose, and that this depression immediately disappears after sexual intercourse is effected. I'm pretty sure I've never had a cleft in the end of my nose. Anyhow, there are several strange old notions about the use of mirrors in testing female virtue. One of these is reflected in a song still popular in the backwoods. Here's the song that I'm sure you've heard before, or at least a version of it. Mama, mama, have you heard? Papa's going to buy me a mockingbird. If the mockingbird won't sing, Papa's going to buy me a golden ring. If the golden ring is brass, Papa's going to buy me a looking glass. If the looking glass don't shine, Papa's going to shoot that bow of mine. Now, I learned one, like you did, that was a lullaby about all the lovely things that Papa or Mama is going to buy the baby so that they can hush-a-bye, right? a young woman near Mena, Arkansas, who repeated these verses, explained the final stanza by saying that the looking glass shines only for virgins and virtuous wives. Okay, so that's most of, that's only halfway through the book. There are so many more things in here, but I don't think that any of them are quite as entertaining as those items are, or as familiar. There are so many little charms, and the people of this area, in my memory, were superstitious people. My mom won't pick up a penny if it's not face up. If it's tails up, my mom won't pick it up. My dad still says bread and butter if somebody, I don't know that they really believe these superstitions, but they still practice the requirements of the superstition. So doesn't it count? It's still active folklore, isn't it? But there are, I would venture to say thousands, at least maybe 8,000 various superstitions and folklore beliefs in this book. My one disclaimer that I'll give about the book is the way that it treats witchcraft. Now, of course, we are talking about a time period and a region that was extremely evangelical. The region is still predominantly a pretty heavy flavor of Christianity. But especially back in that time period, for instance, I know my great-grandmother was a Pentecostal. That's a pretty hefty flavor of Christianity there. And one of my great-great-grandfather, I believe, was actually named after a famous preacher of the time, of the traveling tent variety of preacher. His name was Lorenzo Dow. He was I believe he was a fire and brimstone sort of guy. And so the region and the time period was superstitious and extremely evangelical. So there was a lot of belief in evil, and there's still a fair amount of belief in the region in evil. I am family members with certain people who have very, very staunch beliefs that really do believe. They don't think that there are just good people and bad people. They think that there are demons and devils in the world, and that they influence your actions, and if you aren't living for God, then you are living for Satan. Those are just the delineated nature of their beliefs. And I think that was, that had begun during this time period. So something that's interesting about this book is that it staunchly rebukes witchcraft, and the people talk about staunchly rebuking witchcraft. They, I believe, one of the main ways they say that you become a witch is by, killing a baby, of course. Another way that they talk about you become a witch is that you enter into a pact with Satan, and that the defining aspect of what makes somebody, the difference, I guess you could say, between a seer and a witch, or a clairvoyant and a witch, was the fact that the witch is doing Satan's work. There's evil. The witch is evil. And the book presents this still in a ethnographic point of view, but doesn't do much to say. But that's not to say that that's what a witch is, you know. So I feel like there's one little disclaimer, but there are so many funny bits in here that I kind of became okay with it. That the beliefs and the folklore was so comical and so almost slapstick, that I kind of was okay with the treatment of pagans, I guess, of non-Christian beliefs. So if you are looking for a book on folklore that is entertaining and delightful, this is not your book. If you are looking for details in uses of herbs in Ozarks in this time period, or if you are looking for, which type of wood to use when you are looking for a source of water, this is your book. I can think of so many people who would enjoy this book. If you're from the Ozarks, you would enjoy this book. But otherwise, I think there are other American folklore tales that you can find at your local Barnes & Noble. So this hasn't been a very ASMR video, but I hope it's been relaxed and chill. And if you enjoy listening to me ramble about these books, you could like my video. You could even subscribe. And if you just need to hear me talk on a regular basis, if you need to know the absolute moment that I release a video, you could ding the bell, and you'll get a notification. Thank you for joining the Irreverent Reader. I hope this one has been a little bit comical, a little bit strange. My next video is going to be a little bit more serious, not like heavy seriously, don't worry, it's still going to be irreverent. But in the next video I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, it's just going to be a little bit more serious. So thank you for watching my video, and I hope you have a lovely evening and find something better to read than Ozark Magic and Folklore.